Oh, okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, June the 20th, 2022. We have a couple of items on our work session agenda this evening. The first is the development presentation, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn first.
Thank you, Your Honor. As we had alerted the council to last Monday night, Griffin Riley and their attorney and a couple of their representatives are here this evening to present a mixed-use concept development that they have brought to city staff to the city council. As you all know, at this point in this type of a development, we always like to bring it to the council to get kind of feedback from the council or an impression from the council as to whether or not we should even be continuing discussions with the developer on a development as large as this. So that is why they are here tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for the initial staff report to Mr. Gruss.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council, appreciate the opportunity to be here, and again for Griffin Riley for arranging this meeting tonight. I wanted to quickly just provide a little bit of background on this specific request and the project before we pass it over to the developer. This is actually a project that was filed back in October of last year as a zoning request for, it's about 22 acres of land that's just north of Johnston Drive, kind of surrounds Benton House there in the Timber Trails subdivision. Currently is zoned R3B, or I'm sorry, R3A for a kind of the remnants of the townhomes that are already built. And so the zoning request here, and I'll let the developer kind of speak to the specifics of what their request is and go through the different components of the site. But I wanted to explain a little bit of kind of the review and the timeline of what's happened so far, and then again, some of the feedback that we're looking for this evening. So staff had initially provided some review on their zoning application relative to the kind of layout of the site, the different uses that were being proposed. And as part of that, became evident that a potential incentive request was going to be part of that. And so we actually put the review of the land use application on hold tentatively while we work through some of the details of what different types of tools we might be able to use for that project. And we've worked over the last couple of months on some different options and scenarios, but as Mr. Fearborn alluded to, we felt it would be a good time to bring this project overall as it stands right now to the City Council for some direction, whether or not city staff should continue to work through some of the items that we're here to discuss tonight, or if it's something that's better off maybe held on to for another time in the future with some of the things that are going on in the community right now in terms of other development projects. So I know the developer, Griffin Riley, has prepared a presentation of, again, some of the different components of their project. You'll probably see some references to some different numbers this evening in terms of either units and square footage and potential incentive scenarios. All of that, some of that is still left to be addressed depending on the outcome of this evening. But again, just trying to get some of the direction of where staff needs to go at this point for this project. And so I'm going to pass it over to Kurt Peterson with Polsinelli, who represents Griffin Riley. I'll pull the presentation up on the screen here, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Kurt Peterson. It really is a privilege. I know this takes time out of your lives when we do a work session, and it provides us with great insight. You know, win, lose, or draw. It's really important to come in and be able to have an honest dialogue, so thank you for allowing us to do this. I want to make sure before I proceed that I introduce Jake Lovelace, with the developer, and then also Matt Tapp, who I joked, I feel like I'm sitting next to a celebrity. Jake was having trouble with his chair. He's like, it's on the right. It's the lever on your right on the chair. So kind of funny. And having worked on a number of projects here with Mr. Fearborn and some of you, and then certainly Matt in a different role, it's a privilege to be here. So with that, I always like to give an outline so you know we're not going to ramble on forever and ever, right? And you kind of know when it's getting near the end. The outline is quickly, staff did a good job of touching on this, but we'll show a shot of what we're talking about. You always got to know the land, right? Then we'll go to the project. We'll talk about the proposed incentives, which I think will take up a lot of the time. And then I know what we want to finish with is really talking about the value proposition, because if anybody in our role comes into this place and doesn't talk about the value proposition for the city and the citizens, then they probably shouldn't even have wasted their time to come in. So that's where we'll spend the bulk of our time, and then of course be available as long as you want for questions. So with that as the outline, the project site itself, which will be on the screen here in front of you, a little bit small, but you can see the highway north-south there, right? And you can see the red dot. I think we're going to get help with the lights. coming into focus. So you guys generally do know the site. You have Outer Road there on the west. You have Dean Avenue to the east. You have Benton House, and kind of as a marker for me at least, right, to the south. Yep. And then you have Johnston Drive. If you were extending Johnston Drive from Dean to the west, that would generally be the southern property line, if that gives you a sense of this 22 acres. It's obviously very visible, as we're aware. It's important that this is developed right as you come from the south for sure. This is a gateway of sorts, right, as we come into Raymore. So that's one of the themes that frames how we have laid out and designed this site. So that's the project site itself. We next go to the proposed project. What do we want to do with this particular piece of land? There's three components to this mixed-use project, and you're looking at the site plan on the screen. So we'll start with the orangish or yellowish buildings there. What you see is 4 multifamily buildings of 3 and 4 stories. There's actually one that has a little bit of 5 because you're kind of going downhill, you build into the grade. But generally 3 and 4 story presentation of those 4 multifamily buildings. You also can see a clubhouse. That's the smaller yellow-orangish building in the middle with the pool and various amenities there. This is luxury multifamily. Nothing like, and I'll get into this in a minute, nothing like we have seen here in the city. Closest we have is Belton just down the street, has a newer project you've seen on Y Highway that's been going up. We've all seen that. But again, I'll get into more details in a minute. Just giving you a pass through this site plan. So that's the luxury multifamily. You have the retail that's over by Dean Avenue in red there, about 14,000 feet. Would be neighborhood retail, inline, right? Multiple shops next to one another in one very nice building. And then lastly, the third piece of this mixed-use project is up by the highway where the cursor's showing there, the pointer is showing there. That's a hotel. Until you get your flag, you don't know exactly how many rooms or keys, as they say, but probably in the 80 to 85 key range. Therefore, probably in the range of a 4-story hotel there. So those are the 3, in brief, components of our proposed mixed-use project. Now, better than a site plan, you always have to start with a site plan, but are some rendered elevations. So next, going from top to bottom, these are the 3 pieces, again, giving you a front-on look with some color to it of what the architecture might look like. So at the top, you see the multifamily, again, that 4-story, 3-story there, and 4-story with the garages at the bottom. And then just below that, you have that very nice inline retail there. That would be over by Dean Avenue with the multiple shops. You can see the articulation with the architecture kind of calling that out. And then lastly, the hotel that was up by the highway, you can see in the very bottom. So I sometimes hesitate to show any sort of video, but we kept ourselves very brief. And here's the thought here on the next few moments. So we're going to start with, and by the way, I should say, why do you show video? The point of these videos, which are very short, are quality. Because as we discuss what's proposed tonight, we have failed if we've not articulated very clearly the level of quality that we intend for this project and would carry out. So the first video in a second that we're going to show is our project. It's a rendered fly-through of what this project, all 3 pieces of the mixed-use project would look like. And after that, we're going to go to a project that is actually built so that you don't have kind of a pet peeve is so many in the development community, we show pictures of what something might look like, but we don't show photos of something we've done. Like, let's look at what it's really going to look like. So the second thing we'll go to in a minute is going to be a project we built in Lee Summit that I'll give a little bit more about after we watch this fly through of this proposed project. That amenity clubhouse here that we saw in the middle. Duck under garages in the multi. So you guys know a lot of time goes into these. These are thoughtfully designed to make sure this is what we really want to build. But like I said a moment ago and alluded to, we didn't want to stop here. We wanted to show that this developer is very experienced.
If you struggle to lose weight, you
I
must
wasn't
see
part of the
this.
program, but
This was my infomercial,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
the reason we go to this next project, which is in Lee Summit, this is a multifamily project. So it would be like a piece of what we will do. It's not a mixed-use project, but again, I think as it's so recently built by this developer, it really gives you a sense for the level of quality through pictures now, actual photographs, video. Thank you for indulging us there on watching those two videos. Again, the takeaway from our perspective is to really emphasize quality, because as we get to the value proposition in a minute, which we think is where most of the conversation probably will and should be, quality is really the foundation of everything that creates that value proposition. So with that, the next item in our outline is to discuss the proposed incentives. So there's one main slide on the screen. It's a little busy, but it does capture the essence of what's requested with respect to the three pieces of the mixed-use project. Starting at the top is the multifamily. So the two pieces to that under the Chapter 100 program would be, one, a sales tax exemption on construction materials, and two would be a 25-year fixed pilot, which would start with next year, the next calendar year, 2023, as we get under construction. Construction would last several years. Taxes would stay the same that they are today, current assessed value. And then once the multifamily opens, there'd be a schedule for the balance of the 25 years that would be start at $960 a unit with an inflator every other year at 1.5%, which when you average it out over the entire pilot period would be about $1,043 per unit per year. So the important takeaway for us is to always articulate why. Why is the request made? I just did the what. The why with the multifamily component is because primarily predictable taxes, that's what you get when you set a schedule, right? You don't have to wonder what the assessor might do, nor does your bank or anyone. It's predictable taxes is so fundamental with a product like this that is just, there's not much of it really in the county. It's a very special high-end product. And in terms of abatement, because that's the next thing that comes into my mind and probably yours, right? Well, what is this pilot schedule? You just said how much per unit and this and that. What does that actually equate to? And while you can imagine we're intending not to talk to you for an hour here with all the sorts of details, we're armed with as much detail as you want. But the answer is it's approximately an estimated 10% abatement. That is 10% less than what the taxes otherwise would be in this predictable pilot schedule. Again, Very happy to go as deep into that as you want, but for the moment, in this presentation, we'll leave it at that and be ready for any questions on that. The second of the three pieces, in terms of the proposed incentives, relates to the retail. That also is a 25-year proposed period, which would start with construction. We're only estimating, the market will tell us as we're out there trying to fill our very nice retail building, as you saw, but we're estimating a 2025 construction into 2026. Like with the multifamily, the taxes during construction would be the same that they are at that time. And then once stabilization hit, the proposed abatement would be 50%. And unlike the multifamily, which would be a schedule, a fixed pilot as we call it, literally you could look at a schedule and see what the taxes would be. Under the retail, it would be a 50% abatement, so a half off whatever the taxes would be in that given year as established by the assessor and the mill levies. And that also, and then finishing with that also, I should say, is why. Again, why that for the retail? And the answer there is, you know, it's to attract users. You all, I imagine most, if not all of you, know that when we lease to retailers, restaurants, in buildings like this, the leases are almost always called triple net. And as part of that is that taxes are ultimately paid by the tenant. So this particular request to the city would be completely passed through to the tenant. And the reason is we need to attract really good retailers and possibly restaurants to occupy that kind of building. And to get them off of 58, right, somebody to be attracted down deeper into the south onto Dean Avenue, we have to be really competitive. This would allow us to do that by having a 50% tax abatement that we could pass through. That's how we could provide this kind of retail, which is an essential part of a mixed-use development like this. The last piece is the hotel. And as you can see, each incentive is tailored specifically for what we as the developer would need to make this project happen. So it's different than the other two, just like the second was different than the first. So the hotels is a sales tax exemption only, meaning there's nothing to do with property taxes. Whatever the property taxes are in any given year, hotel property taxes are paid. The benefit would be up front when you're building the hotel, that there'd be sales tax exemption on construction materials. And that is immensely important as we compete to try to get a top flag. We do not have the intention to open up, and no, I'm not trying to denigrate independent hotels, if you know what I mean. We certainly need those, and they provide a price point for folks, a spectrum of price points. We intend to get a flag, a prominent flag, to be able to be the flag on this hotel, and to do that, you have to be competitive. How do we plan to do that? To have a less expensive construction build by being able to take off sales tax. It's a big deduction. That is the only request when it comes to this particular piece of the project. So again, while there's a lot beneath what I'm about to say in one sentence here, which we're happy to talk about, over the period of the proposed abatement, so call it the 25-year period, if this project goes forward and is built and the proposed incentives as requested are approved by the city, then the modeling shows that there'd be approximately, this is during, to be super clear, during the incentives, not someday, right, when they're burned off and gone, but during the incentives, it would generate from these three pieces of the project approximately $450,000 a year to the taxing jurisdictions, and about $11 million over the 25-year period. Again, I said big numbers right there really fast, but I know we'll dig in if you all choose to do that later tonight. The last piece, getting to it quickly, because we at least perceive it as the most important in this sort of policy discussion, is the value proposition, or the economic impact is another way to say that. So this is really the heart, we believe, and I say that respectfully, deferentially, we believe probably at the heart of your policy decision ultimately, and the feedback that you may provide tonight, which is really what is the impact of this project if these proposed incentives are provided so it can move forward on the citizens, the city, and if you wish, even other taxing jurisdictions. What impact does it have, and what value is there, not only to the developer, which is our job, right, but what is the value and the impact to the city and the rest of the community? So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that there may be one of you, or maybe more than one of you, that are questioning whether to entertain any sort of multifamily as part of a mixed-use project. I mean, I think it's a fair thing to just get out on the table, whether that's something that you are considering. So from the developer's perspective, I wanted to say two things about that to get the conversation ultimately started here. the economics of the mixed-use project do not work without the multifamily component. That probably doesn't surprise you. But second, the overall financial feasibility, even with the multifamily, doesn't work without the proposed incentives. Something we're proud of, and again, more that can be unpacked in detail, is what was requested tonight, quickly going through those slides, is exactly what's needed. You have seen, and again, have many other clients, many other projects. You've seen other projects, you've read about them in the paper, elsewhere in the city, in the county and in the metro, right? You've seen much more highly incentivized projects, and some of those might have needed all of that. This project only needs exactly what was requested, and in the grander scheme of projects, has made a pretty modest request, but the point of it is only what's needed. So the question is not from a policy perspective tonight, whether you came into this meeting sort of, I'd say, hungry for luxury multifamily, or whether you're not hungry at all for that sort of product. The question we would respectfully submit to you is, would the city be better off with this mixed-use project, with the city as a whole, with the incentives, or would the city, frankly, be better off waiting for something else to come to the site that may or may not need incentives and would look totally different? I think that's all, again, being honest, it's fair to put it on the table. That is really the paradigm, right, to evaluate. And so the first kind of, I call it a market truth, right, something we can't change, something the market establishes, is that if the apartments don't come to this mixed-use project, they will go somewhere else, probably nearby. A good example would be, like I said earlier on Y Highway, that's a good example of this sort of product that's being constructed right now. So whether it's Belton or Lee Summit, or name the jurisdiction in the area. And then you say, okay, fine, you have a bent, you have a job, you have something you're proposing tonight, it's fine for you to say that. How do you know that? How do you prove that to me? Well, I know that because these sorts of luxury apartment projects, particularly in a mixed-use environment, which are absolutely the most attractive, are super, super desired by municipalities across the metro, Kansas and Missouri side. And the reason is because, there's a lot of reasons actually, but here's my list from my, last 10 years where this has been really hot. One is the high median incomes and the percentage of overall income that's disposable income from folks that come and live in these sorts of mixed-use projects. And it's significant. As you know, the rents are not low. And when they have disposable income, we all know we're convenience shoppers, right? Sure, we shop on the internet, but when we need something that you need fast, or isn't something subject like a gallon of milk, right, or whatever, your local restaurant, you go where it's convenient. And so whether that's right here in our mixed-use project, which we think will be key with the retail we'd bring, or whether it's up on 58 and along the corridor on the Raymore side, these folks bring money and they spend, and that matters to the businesses here in the city. Another reason they're highly attractive, these sorts of projects right now across the metro, is that really, and again, there's so much here, I'm biting my tongue to be efficient, but young professionals, right, one end of the spectrum, and then the other end, lots of ways to describe this, lock and leave, empty nesters, right, renters by choice, on the other end of the age spectrum, flock to these sorts of developments. And again, that's, to be fair, not debatable. That's what we see all across the metro. And those folks are extremely, extremely desirable. And for a lot of reasons, which I'll unpack in a moment. But this project, I will say this too. If we're thinking, because has been some really good development in the last number of years in the city that I've watched, some of which I've been able to be a part of, some of which I've read about, right, and driven by. This project would be unique in the city, and I'm not misusing unique, because I do that sometimes, and a lot of people use that too liberally. The project is not like any other project that is in the city of Raymore. The project has a mix, and then specifically with respect to the multifamily, has a product that when you bundle everything together, we don't have here. What do I mean by that? I mean tuck under garages. I mean enclosed hallways with elevators. I mean really catering to those ends of the age spectrum that I talked about by having approximately 60% of the units would be one bedroom and studio. You say, wait, is that a good thing? It's a great, we need the other, right? We need places built for families, but this is really focused on, like I said, the empty nesters on one end and the young professionals on the other. Over 60% one bedrooms and studios. And you put all that together, and again, there's more detail. There's nothing like that in the city of Raymore. So we create a mix of residential products in the community by offering something new. And when we do that, we create a higher likelihood of keeping or attracting residents when we have more types of housing. And again, kind of another real estate truth, right? When you have more options, you're gonna have more buyers, if you know what I mean. I say that loosely, buyers, renters, whatever, residents. So this developer knows the importance of this mix. You may or may not recognize this. I'm sorry if you're like, yeah, Kurt, I got it. I understand this. But this is the developer that is under construction on the Venue, the luxury townhomes here in the city, and is also the developer that is going through the land use entitlement process with Ascend, which is the trade name that they're giving the new construction attainable housing, kind of the other end of the spectrum, right? Attainable housing that we can be proud of, but a lower price point. So by adding this, the whole point is to come in and have 3 different product types that this developer is excellent at and understands there's a need for, not to duplicate or come over the top of anything that's already being done. So the luxury apartments, that part of this mixed-use project, target, like I said, young professionals and those on the other end of the life cycle spectrum. And they really have several, as I said, I would allude to this. I'm going to mention just a few more benefits because, as you can hear, value proposition. And you'll either believe this, refute it, or agree with it, but wherever you come out, this is key right now in making an ultimate, I think, policy decision. So why do we want these folks in the city? Why do we believe we want these folks in the city? One, and each of these has kind of a buzz name in the industry. Here's one, sticky effect. What do I mean by sticky effect? What I mean is that when somebody comes in, particularly on the front end, right, as a young professional, they come in and they start establishing a life here. And it tends to be a little sticky, right? Then you find a spouse, perhaps, don't need to, but could. Then maybe you decide to have a child. And then all of a sudden you feel like you might want to have a starter home, which Raymore's been leading. The Jim always tells me every time I see him how many housing starts there are, right? And I know it's leading, has been for a long time. So it's the sticky effect. You keep them here, right? You get them here and keep them here. The second is the turnover effect. That has so many names. I kind of made that one up. Not the concept, but the name. If you're Googling it, I made it up because there's no good one that I think makes sense. But the concept that everybody knows is the turnover effect is that when you have folks that have lived perhaps in the city a long time, maybe even in their house for a long time, and there comes a day when they need a different environment. Sometimes they need a higher level of care. Sometimes they want to go to a product like this, right? They just want to lock and leave. And I'm thinking of my parents too, so this is everybody. At some point, it's good for the ecosystem and the community when there's turnover. That's why what I call the turnover effect. You want them to, at the appropriate time, turnover, because what happens is, you've probably seen this, I can think of my neighborhood where I grew up. You bring then younger people and the people that were living in, the young professionals that maybe want to have a kid now, they go into that street or neighborhood where people are moving out, right? The turnover effect, and the first thing they usually do is fix up the garden and finally do the roof that my mom kept putting off, right, or whatever, and they start reinvesting, and it turns over the neighborhood. So that's a big, I've watched that myself, and I think it's a really special and neat way to revitalize communities. The third is the grandbaby effect. Some people call it the grandparent effect, but I think it sounds cuter to say grandbaby effect, which is grandbabies. So when people start to have children, right, their parents or parent, if they're blessed to have parents that are alive and good relationships, which they want to be nearby, right? And so what happens is when you have these lock and leave, really nice multifamily products as part of a mixed use community, it provides opportunities for people like that to come in there, and whether it's their second place to live, maybe they live in wherever, right? Wichita or something, or maybe they live in St. Louis, or maybe they want to have their primary residence be there. You've provided a really nice place that somebody feels good about bringing their, the grandparents to the community. Anyway, those are just some really, poignant examples of what we mean by the value proposition in putting this sort of mixed project together. So there we go. This slide right here, we'll race through this. We're not going to go through all the numbers, and I know you have it in your packet. So this is an attempt using empirical data that Mr. Tapp put together that really estimates, based on this exact type of project that we're proposing of this size, what is the value proposition when you start to, I gave you squishy but real. I say squishy, I wasn't being quantitative, right? I was being qualitative. Very real but qualitative. This is quantitative impacts of bringing this, inducing this kind of mixed-use project to come to the community. So some of the numbers you see on the screen, what they're getting to is, one could be, job creation. We talk about when you bring in new businesses, you bring in new individuals that want to work close to their community, or the sales tax multiplier effect, right? We've all heard that. When you bring more income with residents with disposable income into the community and they spend it there, that helps businesses do better, which hires more people, which brings more people to live there, and it multiplies out. So these numbers you can see here are both construction numbers, impacts, post-construction numbers, jobs, multiplier, all of it put together. And as you can see on the screen, we're talking about a big impact over time with this sort of project. So cities know the powerful impact that these mixed-use projects and luxury multifamily products have on their community, and they seek to secure them. As for consumers, kind of on the resident side, setting aside the municipalities, the consumers feel the same way. And again, that's not an opinion, that's an empirical truth, and that vacancy rates are extraordinarily low, or occupancy is extraordinarily high. It is not unusual now to see on products like this, and this is all from projects I work on, to see 96, 97%, which means full occupancy in these projects, which is why you keep seeing more of them built, right? People don't just build things because, they build them because there's a huge demand for people that want to live in communities that have these sorts of mixed-use products with luxury multifamily involved. So I hope that these sort of qualitative descriptions, as well as the quantitative, data-backed depictions of what this kind of project impact is on the city of Raymore is at least, at minimum, interesting to you, enough to have a dialogue about it. But I also know it's not the end of the discussion. You may be still thinking in your mind, I'd be shocked if somebody's not saying, I still think there might be something better. Don't need incentives, something will come along. It's good dirt along the highway. It's a fair point, right? So I think getting near the end here, something that I would emphasize on that question in your mind is that it's true something will come along, but the question is what? Because, and there's not voting tonight, I don't mean it like that, but in your mind, as you move eventually, express opinions, what have you, a decision ultimately, or a strong opinion against a project like this as proposed with the proposed incentives is actually, you could call it supporting something else, because it's not going to be a field forever, right? And the question is, what are you supporting by opposing this? And so really fast, run through in your mind. The first would be, how about single family? And you think of the site again. You think of the highway. It abuts the highway. Think of Dean Avenue over on the east side. And the answer is maybe, could be. But I think when we really think about it, not ideal. Probably not brand new of all the places where the single family could go. Very rare that it wants to go right up against the highway. So maybe, not likely though. Commercial, it's a big site, 22 plus acres. You all have seen the days of what we have just to the north on Dean Avenue. There's not a lot of new that, right? The big box, we just don't see it. So that's a ton of site area to try to do retail, highly unlikely, at least for a generation, right? When everything changes again like it does every 25 years. Industrial, you can laugh, I'm saying it out loud because we're just ticking things off. You could find industrial that would love that site. We're never gonna do that, right? The city's not gonna support it. It's not the right place for it. So then you get down to, okay, what other kinds of residential besides what we're proposing, a mixed-use project? And I'd say the last one is what was introduced right at the beginning, which is the underlying zoning right now, what's approved on this dirt right now, which is townhomes. I think that, I think it's worth noting that, so we're a contract purchaser, it's how it usually works. We go to see if we can get a project approved and if there's incentives needed, we can get it done. If we can't, then we drop our contract and we go find somewhere else to invest. And so that's the position we're in right now. So we have a seller, right? And the seller is actually the developer of Benton House right there. Very good group. And they've been gracious enough with us to be really patient as we've worked through, and staff has been great. So we're not delayed by staff, no undercurrent there, but it takes time. Something like this takes time. And the seller has been gracious, and they have multiple offers right now in the background to move forward with the plans as approved. Like no rezoning, no new plans, just to build the townhomes. And so we're near the end, which is why we appreciate that this was the timing of the work session. We kind of have to figure out if it works or not. And so the reason I said all that, remember the question I posed, which is, if we don't do this, then what? I will tell you, I don't have a crystal ball, certainly can't make promises. I think it's highly likely that if this doesn't work, if the city's not supportive of this, it'll be townhomes. I think it helps to just bring that into focus, what the likely alternative is. So, as I said that, I want to make sure that, again, as a part of the portfolio as a townhome developer, there's nothing wrong with townhomes at all. We got to have them in every community, zero wrong. But our point is, we have a really great new product for this city that, like we said, we believe brings incredible benefits to the city. And we really are not meeting the needs of those lock and leave, empty nesters to a large degree, and the young professionals until we bring this kind of product. Not a slam on townhomes, a new opportunity that we're trying to highlight and open up. So as you look at the alternatives to the mixed-use product, none of them quite fit from our perspective. None of them are really, we like to say in the industry, highest and best use, right? That's our view on the world. And none of them bring the kind of financial benefits to the city and the other taxing jurisdictions. They don't bring the neighborhood retail for Dean Avenue rooftops, right? The neighborhood retail's big. Being near neighborhood retail raises your property values. That's a big deal. Nice neighborhood retail, right? The alternative isn't going to have the tax base that a hotel brings. Alternatives are not going to, generally, as I said, have a spot for these empty nesters and for these young professionals to come and use their discretionary income to really stimulate the local economy. So with that, I will just end by saying we really are thrilled to be offering this. We're thrilled to be in front of you to have what I know, I just positive will be a rich discussion because there's really robust opinions here, but I hope as we'll be open-minded and listen that we can really dig into and really go back to that question, value proposition, if not this, then what? And because that's, I know you guys do it, that's your job, to figure out what's best for the citizens. So thank you again, and we, all of us, stand ready to discuss, answer questions, anything you'd like.
Well, thank you, Kurt. You know, as you were presenting, many of the council members here this evening and myself, some of you didn't get to go, but we went over to the new Longview project a couple of years ago, toured that facility and the retail that was next to it. So I was kind of picturing this as very similar to that, absent the hotel process, which they will likely not get there unless they put a highway through there.
I agree.
I don't think they're going to. And then you've got all the single family homes going in around that as well. It's a very, very successful, of course they have the anchor of the golf course and the college right there too. But I was kind of picturing the multifamily because it seemed very similar to that, and the amenities were really nice over there. Yeah, Jay?
Might mention to you, Mayor, that development that you're talking about is also NSPJ Architects, who was our partner at Echelon and is our conceptual partner that we use
interesting.
for these
Okay.
renderings and all the architecture that's here. So
Okay.
that project that you toured, Residences at New Longview, was also an NSPJ project.
Okay, interesting.
Just from a quality standpoint, so that's another instance that you guys have seen project that those guys designed.
Right. Is there any conferencing with the hotel? Or is it just strictly 86 rooms or 83, whatever you
So, and
said?
actually, to this point in time, we didn't contemplate. To this point in time, we haven't contemplated conference room with it, but we do have space on there actually to go all the way up to 110 units is what 110 keys is what we were working with NSPJ on.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
we're open to discussion with the city on that.
It's very minute on what we're talking about tonight. I'm sure the council has a lot of questions tonight, so I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. If anybody has anything they'd like to present at this time or ask of the group? If not, this was Mr. Berenson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the commercial portion of this, is there enough flexibility there? If an anchor tenant restaurant wanted to go next to that hotel, which you often do see, is there flexibility to put a Chili's or Applebee's, I'm just throwing out names, something like that, a standalone restaurant, in conjunction with the retail?
On our end, yes, there would be. We'd have to work with staff on that as far as how we work through the mechanics of that. But right now, what we did was we went on ahead and laid out a project that we actually did over in Lee Summit off of Todd George and 50 Highway. So the elevations that we had there, that's from a retail center that we developed over there. because we thought, hey, with all the traffic that's been growing on Dean, and all the rooftops that are coming there into the area, along with what we would be proposing to you guys, that it makes for nice use. But as far as flexibility, yeah, if we had a tenant that we thought would bring value to everybody surrounding the area there, absolutely we'd be open to that.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an excellent program. You guys did a great job. It looks really nice. I'm going to push this to staff, though. A couple of questions I have is, has anybody crunched the numbers and looked at that? And also, our master growth plan, I thought we were kind of right at our multifamily right now. We're trying to let the single family catch up. But can you comment on that?
The numbers have been, again, this all started back in October. So the numbers have been crunched a number of times in a number of different ways. I would say that, and Mr. Lovelace and Mr. Peterson, Matt, all know that these words are probably going to come out of my mouth. With the numbers at the position that we are currently at, when you drill down into them, this would not come to the council with a staff recommendation. We feel there's work that can be done, and we know that as Mr. Peterson said, the dialogue continues. But this is also the first time the council has ever seen a mixed-use presentation and certainly one of this quality coming before you. It is, as was stated, a unique type of development that you're seeing for the first time. So wanted to get it in front of you to find out if in fact you wanted us to continue with the dialogue and see if we can get to a place where staff can get a recommendation behind this. We've also heard many times and in many different ways from the council that and we have expressed to the council that we have reached the economic development plan's limit on apartment complexes as a percentage, never mind classifying everything as multifamily. Multifamily is a term broadly used by developers, but the 15% limit of apartment complexes only before the council has been reached. So the question there would be, is this project of such a unique nature that there are these other components coming into it that the council, again, wants staff to continue to go into conversations here? But if you're looking at it from the pure apartment doors number, we are at that, in the range of that 15% that we've talked about with the council many times.
Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that conversations, also looking at these abatement requests that are potentially on the table, during this time frame, has there been conversations with the school district about those numbers, potential numbers, to see where they fall in their potential decision?
Mr. Lovelace has had a number of meetings with the school district. Maybe if you'd like to describe those.
Sure. So we've actually, I think we're up to 4 meetings with the school district, at least a couple of them in person, and then a number of other calls and a ton of different dialogue back and forth. We haven't received the clearest guidance from the school district. They said that they would entertain we've given them all of the same data that you guys have, effectively. We believe we've met all the thresholds that they've provided to us as far as a break-even analysis for the school district, and that's really the benchmark that we set our analysis off of. They said that they would evaluate it once they got a formal CBA from us. So until a CBA was provided with, which requires, council to say, hey, we're comfortable with this project moving forward as it's presented to us, the school district said that they wouldn't evaluate it until then. They would look at our numbers, they would discuss them. We've had a bunch of pleasant conversations about it. Again, we feel like we have a lot of data that supports our position in it, but that's where the school district currently stands.
And they have, as the council is aware, the school district has indicated to the developer that they need something to react to, is the term that they use. And there is a specific point in time when the city then formally asks for input from those taxing jurisdictions that would be impacted. You'll remember this doesn't actually have a citizen public hearing, but we go to those taxing jurisdictions and ask them about it. That time is not until there's actually an application that we would be going to them. So they're kind of in this, as Mr. Loveless indicated, they're kind of in this no man's land relative to that, for lack of a better term.
Ms. Abdelgawad.
Thank you, sir. I kind of have 3 questions. First, I should know the answer to this, but Mr. Fairborn, will you remind me, when did we set that 15% threshold for apartments?
With the economic development policy passage, and that would probably be, 2015.
2015. And I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, we've been hearing there's a whole lot more interest in multifamily recently than maybe there was then. I'm wondering if maybe that's something we should reconsider. Have we kind of outgrown that number? Secondly, I was thinking during the presentation, the incentives seem pretty steep compared to other things. And I know from my seat, we have seen quite a bit of pushback from the community on offering incentives, and had kind of discussed how incentives were a great spark to get something started in an area. And so just from my personal opinion, a little hesitant to look at something with such steep incentives because of pushback from the community at this point. And then finally, third question for you guys. I know over the years that I've been on the council, we've heard several conversations more in like strategic planning and that sort of thing about kind of that live and work concept with the retail on the bottom and the apartments on the top. And I know you guys have had lots of conversations in the plan, so I was just curious if that had come up, because that's something we discussed that might be a good option before.
And we certainly are open to that concept as well, because we know it's been successful in locations. For us, where we've evaluated that a little bit more, we're actually smaller sites. On this particular site, we felt like we had adequate space to be able to break them out into separate tracks. Also, with the grade that you have and some of those different changes, he mentioned that we've got one of them. We actually are stepping down the project as we go down the grades so that it works best on the site. So to answer your question, this was kind of our live work compromise on this particular site, was to break them out this way, because yes, we absolutely do believe that brings value to residents.
And the only quick on your second question real fast, and again, always try not to launch, so I'm going to do a short answer, and then if you want to get into it, we can a little deeper. So the idea that this is, I think you said steep, so bigger incentives than other things. This is actually much smaller than what you would see, not only in the immediate area, but also as you expand, whether you're going to Belton and you're looking at that new apartment project on Y Highway. I mean, like, yeah, right. I say that to show it's both. I always try to be micro and macro, though, both in the city and outside. We're talking, a fifth to a sixth of the incentives. But again, just a short answer for now.
Mr. Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard you say there anywhere between 85 to 100 and something keys, but I never heard a number of apartments. And maybe
That was just my miss.
the conceptual apartment count is right at 300. And so one of the things that we heard back from the school district that they really liked about this particular project, if there was something that they were willing to offer up, was the fact that of our product mix that we had. So what staff had kind of said, hey, if you're going to look at a project here, we really think that smaller unit sizes, more, single couple occupants before we start having kids, studio units, one bedrooms, and school district had the same response to that. So this would certainly be different as far as in the product mix that we'd have there. But 300 units is the total on that, with roughly 60% of them being studio and one bedroom units.
Mr. Townsend?
I turned my mic off. I don't know what the ask is of council tonight, but my comments related to this particular project and to what Mr. Firborn has stated earlier, based on the several months of discussion that has gone on to get to this point, staff still has some unable to come to a recommendation. And I believe staff has a pretty good barometer of what the council wants, given the previous packages of multifamily units we've gone through and incentives that are surrounding those, incentives to industrial on Chapter 100s. I believe, more discussion is needed to get to the point where staff can have something to come to us that we would be able to digest and kind of move forward with. But just from hearing the conversation and the questions tonight, in particular, as Mrs. Abdulgawad has stated, I also have some concerns with the retail abatement has been presented tonight, particularly with we don't know who and what retail, we don't know what quality of hotel will be coming in very early in the discussion, but I don't know who is in your portfolio or Rolodex that you have to be able to, I'm sure you've probably had some discussions, potential brands to come into those spaces that would be looking for something like this, but for that ask, it has to be pretty top shelf, in my opinion, for that particular ask. But I would defer, again, an ask of staff. If staff still has questions and still has some concerns or reservations before they can make a recommendation to the council via the P&Z, then I'm of the same opinion that there's still more work to be done.
Tabitha?
One, did I miss the packet? Was there, okay.
No, Mr. Peterson misspoke.
Oh, I'm just so used to packets, and I'm sorry, Jim, I got,
Oh, just as, this is FY, this is from the November Good Neighbor meeting. I'm sorry. This,
Okay,
this
no,
is from
you're
then.
good. I
That's
was
what I-
curious, because I was like, wait, and then also the ask, like if we were gonna be given that at some, like, because it's really fast to like blow it up there and then try to, I didn't know if that would be something we'd get later, or if that's just for tonight, because it might change.
Well, it would have to change for it to come forward with a staff recommendation. Normally, tonight's presentation is the development.
Okay.
Normally, incentives aren't, the council asks, are there going to be incentives asked for? It's a yes, no, but there's not this level of detail that's given to the council as far as what those final, it's up to staff to negotiate those and bring those to the council for a up, down, or go back to the drawing board.
Okay.
So a work session format, those really, they give you a high level one tonight. They, as Mr. Peterson indicated, they could really drill down into the columns tonight on what that's about, and we would be here till about 10:30.
Well, and then for the developer, I was curious, a couple things. One, have you thought about doing the retail first instead of the apartment? Because I feel like people getting into an apartment and then construction on the retail starting, and then construction on the hotel, and also then they know what businesses are there. So then they know kind of what they're getting into, if they're going to smell a bakery or if it's going to be a, I don't know, some other joint.
So to answer your question on that, I actually do think that the retail would likely come first, at least as it's proposed to you guys tonight. So absent something happening like Councilmember here asked about having a different use as far as a restaurant end cap or something like that we split off as an individual parcel. If we move forward exactly as we intend here, which we would build that speculatively,
Sure.
Then it would finish construction before the apartments actually transpired. So I would expect that we would be leasing that. We'd be pre-leasing that. And then we do have another I think we have 5 or 6 different retail centers at this point in time. So we absolutely would be pulling from some of the same tenants that we have over there, or some of the same tenants we have over in Olathe. And so, yes, I would guess that we would have tenants that were in that retail space before we would have residents that would be living there. Yep.
And that must be I must have misread it, because when I saw the timeline up there, I thought it was.
No, you didn't. In fact, our modeling, which this is why Jim doesn't want us to get into the weeds too much, because some of this is hocus pocus in the sense that
Sure.
the market's gonna tell us exactly the time, everything. Your eyes are good. We showed it as 2025, so
Okay.
no, you're on.
And then part of the wanting incentive for the retail, you could always just not do triple net. Then it would make,
Well, and so, I mean, you bring up a good point, right? But as far as for most tenants that we actually come into contact with, it's the same end game for them, whether their triple nets are $7 a foot, or whether they're $5 a foot, or whether they're $9 a foot. If their rent's $25 a foot,
Sure.
then that's what it is. And so that's the reason why the ask on that.
And then last question, I'll let other people talk. Did you think about duplexes instead of the apartment complexes? Because you were saying how, like, the garage underneath, well, we have that going across the street, correct? I mean, they have the garages underneath, and the concept looked similar, so I didn't know, it's already, why apartments over duplex? Obviously money, but had you considered the cost of doing the duplexes first?
So for us, just because, and Kurt kind of alluded to it for a minute there, but we kind of look at everything that we're doing and how products complement one another.
Sure.
And so we have a product like that with direct entry, tucked under garages effectively out at the venue. Every single one of those units either has a 1 or 2 car garage that's attached to it. And so we felt like, for us, the reason why this site made more, well, we felt for a multitude of reasons it made more sense to us to do apartments there as opposed to townhomes or duplexes. But one of them was, outside of the fact that we thought the visibility there is such that it really lends itself to a nice multifamily product. The other one was that we have a complementary product down the road. And so we don't want to compete with ourselves as far as at the venue right down the road. So this way, again, we're hitting a whole different renter profile as far as the person that's coming in.
Thanks. Yes, Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have 2 comments. One, I'm a little surprised to hear that the school district basically punted this and said, we need more. I thought their standing position was no incentives whatsoever on anything they considered residential, which we disagree on the definition of residential versus commercial, and this is an example of that. So I'm a little bit surprised to hear that. Don't know, but they were pretty clear on that leading up to the one where they came to the public meeting. The other thing is, I could probably handle the sales tax exemption on building materials for the hotel. 10%'s not too much of an ask if we were willing to give it and we had the appetite for it. Not sure we do. 50% abatement on retail. We're setting a huge policy. We're way out of our bounds. Everybody that comes to us wanting to build retail is going to go back and point to this. That one, I don't see how we can get around. I understand your position. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, you get high quality people in there. We get I love the product. It's a beautiful concept. Love to have it in town. I'm just not sure under your current proposal, I don't think I could support this. And to that end, I concur with Councilmember Townsend. I think my position would be that we let staff see if they can work with it further and see if they can do anything.
Mr. Barber.
Yeah, I would concur with that, and I kind of want to back up for what I said. I'm not against multifamily. I think you've got a beautiful project here. I'm not a developer. You guys do that for a living. You've done your homework. You know what works. You know what doesn't work. I think it is a beautiful piece of property. My problem is that our staff has got to live with this. Our citizens have got to live with this. So if Mr. Fairborn crunches a number and tells me that he can't support it, I'm not going to trump that. So my suggestion would be, like Mr. Townsend, Mr. Holman said, go back, sharpen your pencil, figure out what could happen. But again, I like this concept, I like what you're doing here, so I do support that.
Anyone else? You want to finish up?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I do. I believe what I am hearing from the council is that you would like staff to go back and get to a point where we could come back to you with a recommendation or reach a point where I can't make a recommendation to the council relative to the incentives input that I am hearing here and that the developer is hearing tonight. Several of the council members have said the incentive ask is too high. And there's also the uniqueness, again, of the property with the incentive being able to be moved around to different that we could explore with the developer. 50% versus over here versus a hotel with nothing on it versus, I think I also heard tonight that we'd like to at least have the normal, even though it might not necessarily be them, who does Griffin Riley have in their normal stable of retail that would be on the end, or stable of restaurants that they could garner to be approaching to attract to this. I will tell you that the detail sheets that have all the columns on them also reflected a 2-year delay on the retail, but you got to build out. As the developer indicated, there's a lot going on. They're doing a lot in the city right now. Certainly, I think staff and the council would like to see how some of that's going to perform a little bit, but we also understand we don't want to, the reason the developer is before you tonight is because we don't want to be obstructionist in at least allowing them access to the council to talk to the council about the product. So we will go back and work again with the developer on those things that I heard tonight and bring those back to the council. I would like the opportunity. We normally don't give 2 cracks at the apple to a work session, but because of the uniqueness of the product and the things I've heard about liking the product, I would ask for the council's indulgence to come back before you for a second crack at a work session apple.
Sounds like yeah, Sonia?
One final quick question, Mr. Fearborn. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm wondering, you've crunched the numbers, as Mr. Barber said. You're the guy that we rely on to do that. How big of a gap are we talking? I mean, are we talking about the gap between what's going to work for the city and where we are now as a huge gap we're going to try to span, or is this going to be a minimal amount of work? I'm just thinking, if it's already a huge gap, is it going to be worth staff's time to try to bridge that gap?
If it was a single product, it would be, I could say it's a huge gap. The problem here is we have multiple ways to move these players around and talk about with the developer. So I can't confidently answer that question. The other hurdle that we have to overcome as staff is being on the same page with the developer on the numbers that are being presented. Because you have, before you can get to a final number, there are a number of formulas that lead to those. Those numbers have to be agreed on as well. Council saw that with, in a little bit more simplistic form. With Watermark, we agreed on everything. We had the formulas down, we knew the foundation formulas for the school districts, we knew 100% agreement on every single one of the underlying numbers. The number we couldn't agree on was the number of school-age children that would be coming out of there. For the school district, that constituted a huge gap. So the first challenge we're going to have is to come to an agreement on the underlying numbers that get us to what is the gap and what is the ask. And that's going to be Mr. Gress and my first order of, and Brandon's first order of, here's what we have to come to an agreement on. If we can't get there, there's no gap, it's a non-starter. So, bad way to answer it, but it's pretty complex.
Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I try to look at this through the lens of our constituents, and I know we've twice given incentives or provided incentives for multifamily projects with the promise of more development around that, and dirt has not turned yet, I'm sure, and I hope that it will soon. But we talk about an appetite for more apartments. I believe strongly that our constituents and our residents are kind of in a wait-and-see approach to see if that's worked. And to flip it over here, on this project, I have no issue with the apartments. I think they look very nice. I don't think that our residents and our constituents support any more tax abatement for multifamily. I do believe, however, that we do strongly need the retail, and especially we need the hotel. We desperately, I think, could use a hotel in our town, and especially if it had a restaurant next to it, like I mentioned before. So there are some very strong parts of this project that I definitely support. The one part that I don't think I would support would be, again, the tax incentives for the multifamily part of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Johnson?
Comic, watching the city's Facebook or any other community pages, if you were to add an Olive Garden to this, you probably have a win. Just putting it on the table.
The Red Lobster Olive Garden combination.
Either one of them over. That's right.
Bath and Body Works.
All right, so what I'm hearing is there's room for talk, and so we'll move forward with that and then come back with another work session. Hopefully we've been able to push the big boulder down the road a little bit, okay?
Absolutely. Thank
All right.
you guys for all your feedback. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda tonight is the Cass County Emergency Services Board request for an MOU. So I'm going to take my mayor hat off for a moment, put my ESB board chairman on. In 1997, or in the late 90s, many of the surrounding agencies went to an RMS CAD system, or a report management system, a computer-aided dispatch system that was automated. And that we've had that vendor who has transitioned from ITI to Omnigo for the last almost 25 years now. The support from that group has fallen off over the past few years. And if you'll recall the brouhaha that we had several years ago with regard to centralized dispatch, one of the things that came out of that was that we had a study done that said you're almost there. You're pretty well consolidated. The way you could package it up as a centralized dispatch package was if your PSAPs, your public safety answering points, could speak to one another. In other words, if a 911 call comes into the dispatch center, dispatcher puts it all in and then realizes it's not her jurisdiction or their jurisdiction and sends that off to Cass County, all that information has to be redone. It couldn't just transfer. The call can transfer, but the information couldn't transfer. Omnigo worked on it for the last 2 or 3 years and never could get it done. Their support continues to be as an R&D organization moving toward medical software rather than public safety software. And so we're losing a system that continues to deteriorate. In fact, I talked to Deputy Chief Wilson this afternoon. He said that our IT department has had in a request for software updates since the first of the year and has not gotten a call back from Omnigo. That's been almost a half a year now. So it's getting pretty frustrating. The ESB, several months ago, took on the facilitator because all the departments are suffering through it right now in the county. We all have Omnigo, and we're all wanting a new CAD system. We all want a new RMS. Belton and Cass County want a new jail management system. And so they went out and they did an RFQ and took bids. A company called Central Square, which is kind of been in place in Johnson County for about 10 years now and is now moving out into the metro area here in the Kansas City metro. Many of the smaller agencies are moving toward Central Square. It's a very robust and easier system than what we have. During the demonstrations, I could tell that information that was entered once could then be seen in other portions of the report as you're tabbing through for purposes of recording property, putting pictures in the file, putting other victims' information in the report. And ITI has always had where you had to enter a lot of that again and again and again when you got to those areas. And so it just takes a lot of time to do those reports, and without R&D and software updating it, it's gotten pretty frustrating. So the ESB took on the challenge of finding everybody a fix for the problem. Central Square looks like it's it. The bid came in at a little over $1 million. It's like 1.1 million or a little less than 1.1 million. The CAD portion, which the ESB has always said, because it is it has to be there for the delivery of 911 services, we've taken that on as our, meaning ESB, responsibility, which is about 57% of the project. So we were going to pay for, the ESB is going to pay for out of their budget, well, we were going to pay for the whole thing, and then ask agencies to pay us back. One of the things we did request, and we're before the Cass County Commission on Thursday to request, is $714,000 of that for the services. The other 300 and some odd thousand is for ongoing maintenance and the conversion process. The $714,000 is the initial upfront pay for services, and to actually buy the software. So we went to the county and asked for ARPA funding in that area. It doesn't look like we're going to get it. So one of the things that's been proposed, and I'll just this is a rough spreadsheet that I'd like to pass out to everybody so you can kind of see the numbers that I'm talking about. So wait for everybody to get one before everybody got one? Okay, thank you. The services at $714,846.60 is what we're asking for from the county. We're likely not to get that. The subscription rate is $353,000. That is ongoing for the next 5 years at a fixed rate. And that's the breakdown that's going to have to be paid for by the 6 entities, 7 if you include the ESB for the CAD part of it, for the cost sharing on that. Then if you look down at the third line where it says cost of services per agency, if the county doesn't pick up the 714, which they're likely not to, that would be a breakdown, one-time cost for each of those entities to pay for their portions necessary for the system. Again, you see the bulk of that coming from the ESB, strictly for CAD, really. That's the most expensive part of this program. If we were to amortize that out for payback over a 5-year period, the ESB would bill those agencies for those amounts on that last line over the next 5 years, and then it would go away. The only thing that would remain would be the top line number, which is the number necessary for the subscription, which is an ongoing subscription rate on an annual basis. Again, Cass County's Sheriff's Office is a large number because they have the jail management system, which is part of that. So there, it's a, like I said, CAD, report management or records management, and then the jail management systems. And then Belton has a little bit of that. That's why they're a little higher, because they have a small jail and they use the jail management software. Most of the other agencies just use the records management and CAD. So in order for us to have, there was a, I don't need to pass this out, but I have it in case you want to look at it. We had a PowerPoint from Central Square the other day, and I might as well pass it out so you can see it. In order for us to facilitate the $102,000 discount is for us to be the facilitator, to continue to be the facilitator and the one-stop shop. Each department can enter into a relationship with Central Square, but because of the additional work that would require for Central Square, that discount goes away. So the MOU that will be proposed at a later time, and probably around budget time when we're talking, because it has to be included in our budget process, for each of the agencies, is to allow that intergovernmental agreement between the ESB and each of those agencies for the ESB to be basically the mothership on the project, and to continue the ongoing efforts to keep the CAD system up to date and deliver better services, we feel, to our public safety entities. And because I'm not just talking police, fire departments use the RMS systems as well for and the CAD system as well. So anyway, I'm just let you know about it, that it's coming. So when you see the MOU, you'll have a little bit more background on it than you would if we were starting off from square one. Yes, sir.
I'm sure CAD doesn't mean computer-aided drafting. What is it?
Dispatching.
Thank you.
Computer-aided dispatching. That's all right. Yeah, John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions on this. So our $17,235 a year, is that replacing another fixed cost? Is there another fixed cost that would go away and offset some of that?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearboy.
Okay.
He can explain that.
Yes. In fact, right now, we are paying approximately $40,000 to ITI. We would have to budget for both in the first year. In fact, we would have to budget for all three, the $17,235.81 and the $6,970 would be both budgeted in year one, along with the Omnigo payment. And then in year two, after the conversion takes place, the $40,000 would go away and be replaced by these two.
So this would be a net saving of over 5 years. Okay. And then second of all, so we are handing over some control of our dispatch to the ESB.
No.
None at all?
No. We're
Okay.
just the billing facilitator.
That's it.
And making sure that we negotiate the contract, the
Okay.
annual maintenance contract for everybody. That's it.
My ask was going to
We
be,
have no control.
did the police department, and any other comments from the police department on recommendation, or I'm assuming they're on board with this and they're recommending this?
The short form on that is going to be yes. They recognize that the Omnigo system is behind, and it's going to continue to get further behind as they emphasize the medical end, and that's kind of where they're heading. So police department recognizes that Omnigo is going down, and they like this system. They've been in, as a matter of fact, the technical committee that reviewed the bids that came in consists of our IT department, our dispatch supervisor. The police have been in on this from the beginning. Still some questions. Obviously, it's a new system, but definitely supportive of this going through. The city manager, anytime that we don't have the expenses next year that we have this year, is going to be all for this. So I would say absolutely. The nice part about having the MOU in place before the budget is it lets the ESB know, but it's also when we get to budget time and I'm talking to you all and it's within the budget as a line item, I can be highlighting that out and we have it rock solid ahead of time, which so many things in the budget aren't that way. So we like that point of it.
Thank you. And then I'll sneak in a third one I didn't ask permission for, but I'm assuming this will save some man hours too if it autofills or pre-fills out these forms.
Yes.
And I went to the doctor's office and I've been to a few, and one of them gave you an iPad and you fill it out and it's a few pages and you're done. And then I went to another doctor's office and I had a clipboard and every page was the same thing, filling out the same thing over and over, and it's frustrating. I've several years in the Air
And
Force.
that's a great likeness to what we've had, because that is exactly what happened, John. And this will give us the true interoperability where we can share that information instantaneously. In fact, one of the things talks about, well, I don't have it here, about it talks about how the time is decreased by 50% on the management part of it, and it speeds things up so well. It's a great system, and in the future, there's a capability for us to hook into Johnson County, to hook into Jackson County, and share those bits of information with each other. We can even share report management, so they can, if we need to send them a copy of a police report because they have an ongoing investigation related to ours, boom, it's in their hands. They have it. Yeah.
And I just had a question, and obviously all these political subdivisions, if somebody opts out or doesn't do it, it's going to change the pricing on that, but what's your feel on?
So the pricing would change because their discount would go away. And they can negotiate their own contract. I mean, they can't negotiate their own contract. They can negotiate their own connectivity if they want to, but what it does is just eliminates their discount on the thing. Everybody's on board with it. We had a meeting, a special board meeting last Wednesday, and everybody's there. Everybody's head was nodding. We had a couple of city managers there. Pleasant Hill said she's already budgeted for it. So, I mean, it's going forward, but we just need the formalized MOU, which Paul Campo, our attorney, and is also the attorney for the county, is putting the MOU together for everybody. But I just wanted to let you know that it's coming, so you kind of have a better understanding. Yes, sir.
I'm in support of it. It makes sense. Got to upgrade your computer systems once in a while. It's time to do it. It's going to save us money in the long run, and we get a better product. I was curious, what kind of impact would this have on our command vehicle? I know at one time we were looking at being able to go to the command vehicle as standalone dispatch. If we lost capability here, we ran into problems with Mark not wanting to certify us as another PSAP, and we haven't given up on that, but I think it's still on the GIMBA board at some point, and I just was curious as if it was going to have any impact on the command vehicle.
I can answer that one for you. At this particular time, those conversations with Mark happened right there when the pandemic started. The technical committee window with Mark hasn't met recently to review whether or not we want to try to go forward with that application again. This would just be a new way to report how we are dispatching when we would present that to Mark again, but we have had discussions about trying to present that to him again. The command vehicle itself is fully capable of handling this particular system.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, great. Did you have anything else? You acted like you would. Oh, okay. All right. Any other, yes, Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be available next Monday night for the meeting.
Okay. And you're not going to be with me. I'm going to be in Florida. He's got the helm again. Yes.
I also will not be available this coming
Uh-oh,
Monday.
we're getting down on a quorum thing.
I'll be in Florida also, so.
Okay. All right. As long as we have 6. Yeah, because I won't be here either. All right. Good to know. Thank you all. Anybody else have anything? If not, we'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.